Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! I'm a 24-year-old guy with big dreams. Ever since I was a kid, I've been fascinated by cars. I'd spend hours in my dad's garage watching him tinker with engines and learning everything I could. As I grew older, that passion only intensified. I worked part-time at local auto shop throughout high school and college, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. After graduating, I decided it was time to take the plunge and start my own auto shop. It wasn't easy. I had to scrimp and save every penny, working long hours at a repair chain to build up my funds. But finally, after years of hard work, I had enough to put a down payment on a small garage space about 40 miles from where I live. I know how you're thinking, 40 miles is a long commute, but real estate closer to home was way out of my price range, and I could pass up this opportunity. The location was perfect right off a busy highway with plenty of potential customers. Plus, I managed to convince two of my best mechanics I know to leave their jobs and come work with me. Things were finally falling into place, and that's when my mom called about her car accident. She'd been rear-ended, and while waiting for the insurance to sort things out, she needed a vehicle. Now, my mom and I have always had a complicated relationship. She can be overbearing and manipulative at times, but still, she's my mom. So when she asked to borrow my car, I agreed. Sure, ma, you can use my Corolla for a bit. When do you need it until? Oh, just until August 2nd. I'll be working from home after that Friday, so I won't need it as much. Alright, that works. I'll need it back on the 2nd though. I'm starting to set up the shop and it's a bit of a drive. Of course, sweetie. Thank you so much. You're such a good son. I should have known better. I should have gotten it in writing or something. But hindsight is 2020, right? Fast forward to August 13th and I still don't have my car back. I've called, texted, left voicemails, nothing. It's like she's fallen off the face of the earth. I even took a lift to her house only to find my car locked up in her garage. She wouldn't even answer the door. Frustrated and desperate, I called the police. When they arrived, I explained the situation. Officer, that's my car in there. I lent it to my mother, but she was supposed to return it almost 2 weeks ago. I need it for work. The officer says, I understand your frustration, sir, but because you allowed her to use a car, this is considered a civil matter. You'll need to send a 10-day letter of demand before we can report it as stolen. 10 days? But I need my car now. I've got a new business to run. I'm sorry, but that's the law. I suggest you start with that letter of demand as soon as possible. I felt like I was going to explode. Here I am, $7,900 deep into my new garage, with two mechanics waiting to start work, and I can't even get to my own shop. I've only got $200 left in my name, which isn't nearly enough for constant left rides back and forth. The worst part is, I still owe $14,000 on that car. It was due for an oil change at 58,450 miles. And knowing my mom, she's probably driven it well past that point without even considering maintenance. I am worried sick about what condition it'll be in if I finally get it back. I drafted a letter of demand, but those 10 days felt like an eternity. Every day that passed was another day I couldn't work. Another day my mechanics went unpaid. Another day closer to my dream slipping away. On the 10th day, I headed downtown to the police headquarters. My hands were shaking as I approached the front desk. I am here to report a stolen vehicle. The officer at the desk looked at me sympathetically as I explained the situation. They called in a sergeant, who listened to my story and then picked up the phone. Ma'am, this is Sergeant Johnson with the police department. I am calling about your son's vehicle. He's here to report it as stolen. I couldn't hear what my mom was saying on the other end, but the sergeant's face grew stern. Ma'am, I need you to understand the seriousness of the situation. Once your son presses charges, this becomes felony possession of a stolen vehicle. If you're caught driving it or we find it at your house, you'll be arrested and charged. Your son won't have any say in the matter once he signs that line. Do you understand? There was a long pause and then a sergeant nodded. Very well. I suggest you return the vehicle immediately. He hung up and turned to me. She says she'll leave the car across the street from her house with a spare key in a glove box. Would you like an officer to accompany you to retrieve it? Yes, please, just in case. An hour later, I was standing next to my Corolla, key in hand. The officer stood nearby as I inspected the car. The maintenance light was on and the odometer showed over 2,000 more miles than when I'd lent it out. But at least it was back in my position. I got my car back and now nothing was going to stop me from making my dream a reality. I drove straight up to my shop where my two mechanics were waiting. They've been patient and understanding throughout this whole ordeal, even lending me an old beater so I could get around once I explained the situation. I tell them, alright guys, let's get to work. We hit the ground running. Within days, we had our first customer, then another and another. And before I knew it, we had 7 satisfied customers and 5 more waiting on parts. As for my mom, well, that's a bridge I'll have to cross eventually. But for now, I am focused on building my business and proving to myself that all this struggle was worth it. Let me start from the beginning. I met my crazy ex during my first year of college. We were both studying business, and she seemed nice at first. We started dating and things were good for a while. But as time went on, I noticed she got jealous easily and would try to control who I talked to or hung out with. After we graduated, we moved in together, and that's when things really went downhill. She'd check my phone constantly, accuse me of cheating if I was even a few minutes late getting home from work, and throw huge tantrums over the smallest things. It was exhausting. The final straw came when I found out she'd been lying about taking birth control pills. She told me she wanted to get pregnant, so I'd be tied to her forever. That's when I knew I had to get out of that relationship for good. Breaking up with her was a nightmare. She refused to accept it was over, stalked me for months, and kept trying to win me back with grand gestures that just creeped me out. I had to change my phone number and move to a new apartment to get away from her. A year after the breakup, I met the woman who would become my wife. She was amazing, kind, funny, and completely drama-free. We dated for 2 years before I proposed. I was finally happy and excited about the future. I didn't hear from my ex during that time, so I thought she'd finally moved on. The day of the wedding arrived, everything was perfect. The church looked beautiful, all our friends and family were there, and I couldn't wait to marry the love of my life. The ceremony started, and as we stood at the altar exchanging vows, that's when all hell broke loose. The church door slammed open and there she was, my ex, wearing a white wedding dress and looking completely unhinged. Before anyone could react, she pulled out a gun and pointed it at the priest. "Stop the wedding. He's mine, and no one else can have him." Everyone froze. My bride looked terrified, and I instinctively moved in front of her to shield her. "What are you doing? Put the gun down." "Shut up. We're meant to be together. I am not letting you marry anyone else." She was waving the gun around wildly, and I was scared she'd accidentally shoot someone. That's when my cousin, who's a police officer, sprang into action. He been sitting in one of the front pews and managed to sneak up behind her while she was distracted. In one swift move, he tackled her to the ground. There was a loud bang as the gun went off, and for a second I thought someone had been shot. Thankfully, the bullet just hit the ceiling, and no one was hurt. A bunch of the guys at the wedding rushed to help my cousin hold her down. She was kicking and screaming the whole time. "Let me go. He's mine. You can't have him." My cousin tells her, "You're under arrest for attempted assault with a deadly weapon and disrupting a religious service." It took 4 guys to keep her pinned down while my cousin handcuffed her. She just wouldn't stop screaming. "This isn't over. We're meant to be together. You'll see." As they dragged her out of the church, I turned to my bride who looked pale and shaken. "Are you okay? I'm so sorry this happened." I think so. That was terrifying." "Who's that woman?" "My ex. I had no idea she'd do something like this. I thought she was out of our lives for good." I hugged her tightly, feeling guilty that my past had intruded on what should have been the happiest day of our lives. What do we do now? Should we continue with the ceremony? I looked around at our guests who seemed just as shocked as we were, and the priest looked rattled but gave us a reassuring nod. "It's up to you, but I'm willing to continue if you are," he says. I turned back to my pride and took her hands in mine. This isn't how I imagined our wedding, but I still want to marry you more than anything. What do you think? She took a deep breath and smiled. Let's do it. We've come this far, and I'm not letting her ruin our day. So we went ahead with the ceremony. It wasn't exactly the fairy tale wedding we planned, but in a way, it made the moment even more special. We'd faced our first big challenge together and came out stronger. As we said our vows, I could hear police sirens in the distance. My cousin came back in just as we were exchanging rings. She's in custody now. They are taking her to the station for booking. Sorry about all this. Thanks for being here. You probably saved someone from getting hurt. He gave me a quick hug before returning to his seat. The rest of the ceremony went smoothly, and when the priest pronounced us husband and wife, the whole church erupted in cheers. I think everyone was just relieved it was over and had a happy ending. At the reception, my new wife and I tried to enjoy ourselves despite the craziness earlier. Our friends and family were amazing, rallying around us and doing their best to lighten the mood. My best man says, well, that's one way to make sure no one forgets your wedding. We laughed and it felt good to release some of the tension from earlier. My wife squeezed my hand and whispered to me, most couples worry about rain ruining their wedding. We got a gun-wielding ex instead. I think we can handle anything life throws at us after this. I couldn't help but smile. She was right. We've been tested on our very first day as a married couple and came through it together. Later that night, as we were getting ready to leave for our honeymoon, my cousin pulled me aside. Just wanted to let you know your ex is being held without bail. They are adding attempted kidnapping to the charges. She'll be away for a long time. I was relieved. Finally, that chapter of my life was truly over. I tell him, thanks for everything. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here. That's what family's for. Now go enjoy your honeymoon. You've earned it. As my wife and I drove away from the reception, I was grateful actually. Yes, our wedding day had been crazy and not at all what we planned, but we gotten through it together. And really, isn't that what marriage is all about? 5 years ago, I was living my best life in the city and enjoying my freedom. Then out of nowhere, my mom passed away. It was sudden, a heart attack that no one saw coming. My world turned upside down in an instant. My dad, who'd always been a bit difficult, was left alone. He had some health issues, nothing major, but enough that he needed help. At first, I thought I'd just stay for a few weeks to help him adjust. Those weeks turned into months, and before I knew it, I'd given up my apartment and job in the city to move back to my childhood home. Looking back, I should have known better. Dad had always been challenging to deal with, even when Mom was around. She was a buffer between us, smoothing out his rough edges and making excuses for his behavior. Without her, his true colors really showed. Don't get me wrong, I love my dad, but he's a narcissist through and through. Everything has to be about him all the time. If it's not, he makes sure it becomes about him. The verbal abuse started small, little digs here and there about how I wasn't doing things right, how I was wasting my life taking care of him, and then it escalated. I've lost count of the number of times I've been called useless, ungrateful, or worse. Each time I tell myself it's the last straw, that I will leave and let him figure things out on his own. But then he'll have a good day or he'll need help with something important and I'll cave. I know it's my fault for not setting boundaries, for not sticking to my guns, but it's hard when it's your parent. Anyway, my birthday is coming up next week. It's the one day of the year I try to keep for myself. A small rebellion against the constant demands of caregiving. I was looking forward to it. Maybe making plans with my friend from the city who I rarely get to see anymore. Then yesterday, Dad dropped his bomb. I need you to take me to my doctor's appointment on your birthday, and then get a haircut after lunch. Dad, can we please schedule those for a different day? I'd really like to have that day to myself. Why? It's just a couple of hours. You can do whatever you want after that. The haircut isn't urgent, right? We can do that any day. I might be making plans with my friend that afternoon. And that's when he exploded. This is stupid. You can't take me? What kind of doctor are you? After everything I've done for you. Dad, please. I help you all the time. I take you to all your appointments. Can't I just have this one day? You're so selfish. It's just a half-hour haircut. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? Because it's my birthday, and I want to decide how I spend it. Is that too much to ask? Yes, it is. I'm your father. You owe me. I could feel myself starting to cave, the familiar guilt creeping in. But something in me snapped. Maybe it was a buildup of years of this treatment, or maybe it was just the thought of losing the one day I had claimed for myself. I tell him, no, Dad, I don't owe you my birthday. I put my life on hold for years to take care of you. I've endured your insults and your tantrums. I am not asking for much, just one day. One day to do what I want without having to worry about your appointments or your haircuts or your needs. Is that really so awful? How dare you speak to me like that? After all I've done. What have you done, Dad? Besides making me feel guilty for having a life outside of taking care of you, I love you. But this isn't healthy for either of us. I could see the shock on his face. I'd never stood up to him like this before. I'm going to spend my birthday how I want. Your appointments can wait a day. And if you can't respect that, then maybe it's time we looked into other care options for you. You wouldn't dare. Try me. I am done being your punching bag. I walked out the room shaken but feeling oddly liberated. I knew this wasn't the end of it. There would be more arguments, more guilt trips, but for the first time in years, I felt like I had taken a step towards reclaiming my life. As I closed the door to my room, I heard my dad muttering and complaining, but for once, I didn't rush back to appease him. Instead, I pulled out my phone and called my friend. Hey, remember how we talked about maybe meeting up for my birthday? Let's do it. In fact, why don't you come stay for a few days? I think it's time I started living a little again. It was a small step, but it felt like the beginning of something new. My birthday was going to be mine, and maybe this would be the start of me finding a balance between caring for my dad and caring for myself. As a lifelong dog lover, adopting a rescue pup was my first priority after moving into my own apartment. We quickly bonded and became inseparable companions. Living in a city with an energetic dog can be challenging, so discovering a beautiful park nearby was a godsend. With its creek, trees, and open spaces, it became our daily refuge. The only drawback was a narrow entrance path running alongside someone's backyard, separated by a tall, wooden fence. At first, I didn't think much of it, but soon I noticed a disturbing trend. Cigarette butts littered in the grass along the path. It was clear that the homeowner was flicking them over the fence, turning our natural oasis into their personal ashtray. I tried to ignore it, focusing on enjoying our walks, but as weeks passed, the problem worsened. The final straw came one evening when a lit cigarette butt flew past my face, nearly hitting my eye. Furious but determined to handle the situation tactfully, I devised a plan. The next day I returned to the park with gloves and a trash bag. I collected over 100 cigarette butts from the pass, then unceremoniously dumped them back over the fence into the homeowner's yard. A shout of surprise erupted from the other side. "What the hell?" a woman's voice exclaimed. "Oh, I'm sorry," I replied innocently. "I thought you might want these back. You seem to have lost them in the park." An argument ensued with a woman threatening to call the police. I calmly pointed out that I had evidence of her littering in a public park, and that the authorities might be more interested in her actions than mine. After a tense silence, she grudgingly backed down, demanding I stay away from her property. I agreed on the condition that her cigarette butts stay out of the park. From that day forward, I never saw another butt on our path. My small act of rebellion had made a difference, not just in keeping the park clean, but in standing up for respect. Respect for the environment, the community, and the idea that we all share this world. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire, or in this case, litter with litter to make a point. And if my actions made that inconsiderate neighbor think twice about her behavior, then perhaps I made a tiny positive change in the world. And that's something worth wagging your tail about.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.